As you know, so many people are so distracted, and there's a lot of entrepreneurs that could be so much more successful, not only monetarily, but successful in their life with what they want to accomplish. They have more freedom. So it's about being more time freedom. It's about managing, not managing, but delegating to people who can manage your business so that you are free to lead, if that's your sweet spot, and to pursue larger opportunities.
Hey, Masters, welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery podcast. And today we are with Mrs. Jude Jernudd. Jude, how are you today?
I am fabulous. I'm in Los Angeles. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's a podcast day. I'm doing another podcast after you and have a meeting with the publicist. It was a little bit after that. And so it's a pretty full rocking day out here in beautiful sunny California.
I love it. I love your background too. Although the black is pretty cool. You must have a really nice camera that it does that.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, we don't use the green screen because my video producer, he told me this about 3 years ago. He said, I'm so over green screen. And so we don't use green screen anymore, but we use different, I've been doing a lot of virtual presentations, but now thank goodness in person is back. But when I do a presentation and I'm standing up and I'm moving, I just don't want any distractions behind me. And so that it's just, a focus. And so that's why, and we changed, we've got a gold one and a white one and, all different things.
Well, it looks good. It looks high quality. So awesome. I'm glad we were.
Thank you. Oh, I like yours too.
Thank you. Yeah, I play around with it. I've got the green screen. I got all kinds of good stuff too, similar to you. So, all right, well, listen, first off, we appreciate you being here. So let me tell the people who you are, okay, that are listening. And by the way, this is a live podcast. We also, we'll be launching on, make sure you're following Path to Mastery podcast, anywhere where you listen to your podcast, iTunes, anywhere you listen to your podcast. We also are on our YouTube channel. This is live recorded as well. Video will be launching on David Hill Coach is my YouTube channel. So make sure you're following YouTube as well as checking out the podcast. Path to Mastery. Today, we are with Jude, who is the CEO of the Jernudd Company for Excellence, Performance, and Professional Development. She's the co-founder of COBE. I hope I said right. COBE, correct? Good. COBE Coach, which stands for Collaboration of Brilliant Entrepreneurs. Man, I want to be a brilliant entrepreneur. That sounds super cool.
Well, I think you are, David.
All right, good. Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. All right. And you are, this is what I thought was even cooler is you are experienced as a television newscaster, TV personality, and get this, you've interacted with and interviewed the most influential people in the world in personalities. You've interviewed Bill Clinton, Oprah Winfrey, Meg Whitman, Magic Johnson, Larry King. Wow. Phil Jackson, Regis Philbin. I mean, that is a flipping ridiculous list of people. Man, you're making me look like a little rookie here with Mel Robbins and Gary Vee and all that. So
well, it's all relevant, right? And I just want to have one slight correction. Some of these were social interactions. Bill Clinton was a social interaction. Okay, and someone said in an introduction, David, and she coached Bill Clinton. I said, I can't take that credit. I would like to have said, say I did, but I can't take that credit. But yes, I've interacted with a number of people, including all the people you mentioned. And yeah,
that's amazing. Let me ask you this. So when you're interacting with those types of people, I mean, what do you have like a favorite, like, is there a favorite interaction you had or interview that you had and what made it, like, what was it about it that made it?
I get asked that question quite a bit, David, because everyone says, who's your favorite? What was your favorite? And I will say to you that, what I love is when I ask questions and the interviewer, the person I'm interviewing, the interviewee, and says, I've never been asked that before. And generally it's high profile people, who get a lot of interviews and you just don't, I look for, first of all, I'm sort of like Larry King in that sense that I look for what I want to know, just the curiosity, satisfaction. And then I think about what are the viewers, listeners, readers, I say, when I say audience, that means all encompassing, but what do they want to hear? What would they be asking if they were in my position? And so I ask those kinds of questions. Like for instance, when I interviewed Phil Jackson, and he's one of my favorite interviews because when I interviewed him, he I didn't talk about basketball because everybody talks about basketball with Phil Jackson, and he's on record for all the basketball. So I asked him questions about what it was like with the personalities and how it was like to coach and what he attributed his successes to. He almost went into ministry. And so I asked him about those kinds of things. And so it's information people haven't heard before. And when you have a good interviewer or interviewee, they don't answer in scripts. They're just, you can always tell if it's been a scripted answer that they've done 5,000 times. And so even if you're interviewing someone about a new film or whatever, and they're on that whole press junket or new television show, you want to ask something about it that they haven't been asked before. And so they really have to think, and it's not scripted. And that's what I loved about Phil Jackson, because he answered my questions with thoughtfulness, and it never sounded like he delivered those answers 55 times before. So that's the kind of interview I like.
That's cool. That's super cool. Yeah. One of the things I remember I used to and I'd be interviewing people as I've done more interviews. I'm guessing you've probably done a lot more than me. This will be episode 299 or something on the podcast. But I used to I'd be speaking with somebody and they'd say something and it'd be a question in my head, but yet I wouldn't ask it, Jude. And then, in the moment, I'd be like, I'm not going to ask that. But then later on, as I'd be listening to the episode and realizing that, wow, that would have been the perfect question to ask right there. And that was kind of like a moment for me to look back at myself as a podcast host and say, wow, now whenever I think of a question, I'm just going to ask it. Have you ever had any awarenesses like that as you do all these interviews?
I don't know that exact experience, but I do know this. And I heard it was Matt Lauer, actually, before Matt Lauer collapsed on the Today Show. And he was asked on a talk show, he was being interviewed, cameras reversed there, situation reversed. And the interviewer asked him, do you ever finish an interview and say, oh, I wish I had asked? And he said, every time, because hindsight is wonderful. If I generally think of it in the moment, like as you just said, I probably ask it. So I don't remember that exact incident about thinking of a question and not asking it. And I mean, I feel if someone doesn't want to answer it, that's up to them to control that, not me, And so I answer it. And so I ask, but I have gotten finished with an interview, especially when I'd watch on TV and I'd say, oh my gosh, I wish I had asked David this, and then I didn't. But when Matt Lauer said that, and I thought, now here he was, one of the most influential shows in history, the Today Show. And he said, every time. And I thought, well, if he can say that after every interview 5 days a week, I guess that, we all can give ourselves a break there. But it's true. You always think, hey, that would have been a really good question. I wish I'd asked that, but didn't.
Yeah. Well, so I think for me, the thing is I'd go back and I would visualize myself. I'd remember in my head saying, hey, I should ask this, but then saying, nah, I'm not going to ask that. I'll just keep moving. Almost like you said earlier, I'm sticking to a script almost. That was in the beginning. And then I just says, you know what, let's just have a conversation with people, right? It's the same thing I do in sales. Let's just have a conversation and ask questions and see where it goes, right?
Yeah, except that I do prepare. I mean, see, I'm really well prepared, meaning that I love the conversational style. And, I hear you on Clubhouse and that is your style. It's my style as well. It's very, very conversational. I write that way. I talk that way. I'm on a stage speaking that way. It's very conversational. And at the same time, I'm extremely well prepared. and so I have
you have to be, right?
I have some
you have to be
really
prepared.
Exactly. And especially, I mean, if you're interviewing someone for TV news, you've got to tell the story, you've got to help them tell the story. So there's specific questions you have to ask. But at the same time, let me just suggest this. I realized early on, and no, Regis was a good mentor to me, by the way. You mentioned him. And so when I first went on television, the producer said to me, we don't want you to watch anybody else. We just want you to go out there and just be yourself. Well, of course, what did I do? I went back and studied everybody else. and I realized I had an interesting mix. I said, I'm like Barbara Walters. I don't hesitate to ask a really good, strong question. And like Larry King too, I'm curious. So, I used a little bit of elements of a lot of different, and yet being extremely yourself. And I got what they meant. I mean, they didn't want me to try to be, like anyone. And I got that. I don't think I could have been anyway, even if I wanted to. But I did like to prepare, because then you always have somewhere to go in case the interviewee isn't good.
You know what?
Doesn't deliver.
Here's probably a question that you've never been asked.
All right.
Okay. So I don't know if you watched the 60 Minutes interview last Sunday with President Biden on, did you see that interview?
I did.
Everybody did, right? So one of the things my wife and like, I'm always looking at like Larry King and Oprah, like these guys are masters at interview, right? But I don't remember the gentleman's name. You may know it. That was doing the interview.
I think was it Steve Cross? No, I think no, it was Scott Paley. I think.
Scott, okay.
I don't remember. I think Scott. Yeah.
So one of the ways he posed his question 3 times was, "I wonder why." And I said to my, "Why do you think he's asking it like that? Like, why is he saying, 'I wonder why,' instead of just asking the question?"
It's softer sometimes. A little softer.
Is that it?
I don't recall that part incident. It's just like a reporter will say, I've read that or I've heard that, they'll say things like that. And so he may say, I wonder why. And it's just a little softer approach.
So
and maybe that was part of his technique to get where he wanted President Biden to go.
Yeah. So just kind of let him loosen up a little bit. So it's not about
that could have been. I don't know what his motivation was.
Just a personal yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe just a personal conversation. Yeah. So all right, awesome.
And people do you see, this is the thing, especially when you're on television all the time, and especially live TV, you so much of your own personality has to come out. There's just things you just can't script. A set falls down in another room and the audience hears it at home. You have to say what happened. You have ad lib and be ready to go, and it'd be totally, you can't take any 30-second mental mini vacations out there. You're there, it's live. And everyone has their own style and technique, and we all have fallback habits. And fall back, not bad, fall back. And that may be one of his fallbacks. I know when I first went on television, not that he's not an experienced and he's not new on television, but I would say, okay. Every time I would ask a guest a question, I would say, okay. Well, of course it's okay. When I'd critique myself afterwards, they just said it. You don't need to say, okay, okay. And it was my way of letting people know I heard them without interrupting them. But I'd look at that and I'd hear this okay all the time, and I stop it. This is not adding anything to this interview. So we all have our fallbacks and our techniques and whatever. And a strong reporter, by the way, doesn't hesitate to ask a question 3 different ways until they get an answer they're looking for, because a lot of people can skirt answers. They're used to knowing how to skirt a direct answer. And so a reporter said, I'm going to try it this way, and they'll ask a question a different way to get to an answer.
Okay. Yeah. That's a really, really great point. So let's talk about your COBE coach. So let's talk, what exactly, explain what that is for our listeners. What's COBE coach?
My background, as you know, television, and we coach a lot of executives, David, for presentation, for media, how to be more motivational, inspirational, communicate the vision, interact with other world leaders. We work with a lot of C-suite in that area. And I'd been in a coaching program for entrepreneurs, and I wasn't, I grew up in the restaurant business. My mother had a restaurant. I started waiting tables at 12. Today, that might be child labor. And at age 16, I started managing that restaurant. Well, she bought a second one. So I was used to being in the entrepreneurial space with my mother. My grandmother had 2 businesses. And that was back in the day when a lot of women were not, they were school teachers or they were in nursing, but they weren't necessarily entrepreneurs, at least in where I grew up. And so I was in this coaching program for entrepreneurs. And the day that our coach quit, 2 people came up to me, independent of one another, and said, well, we don't care that he quit because we know where we're getting our coaching. And after the second person said it, I thought, maybe I better put together the kind of transformational work that I've been doing to help people escalate their careers and accelerate, and do it in a group setting. So I launched COBE, the Collaboration of Brilliant Entrepreneurs. And it's it's a quarterly coaching program that people come here in Los Angeles. And we're having our the last quarter of the year, next month, October. And then they have a mid-quarterly session with me. That's part of what the program encompasses. And David, it is fabulous. And it's some of the things that you've talked about on Clubhouse, and I've talked about. It's developing better habits. It's eliminating distractions, managing your time better, pursuing bigger opportunities, delegation, and having a plan. And as you know, so many people are so distracted, And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that could be so much more successful, not only monetarily, but successful in their life with what they want to accomplish. They have more freedom. So it's about being more time freedom. It's about managing, not managing, but delegating to people who can manage your business so that you are free to lead, if that's your sweet spot, and to pursue larger opportunities. And when I hear people say, "Oh, I'm so busy and I'm working, 80 hours a week," and that is not a status symbol. And that's also not sustainable. So COBE is very process driven. I have created process after process. I spent 2 years developing processes that I borrowed from some of the transformational leadership. I work with CEOs and how they become stronger leaders and develop their leadership style. So it's about delegating, managing time, increasing revenue, having more fun, more adventures, and interacting with a different layer of clientele. And for me, it's always, how do you advance? And it's very difficult, David, very difficult for people to change habits, even get clarity about their business independently, which is why I created the group session for the collaboration of brilliant entrepreneurs. And I laughed when you said, "Well, I want to be a brilliant entrepreneur." And I said, "Well, you are." But I said that somewhere someone heard me talking just to a friend, and this woman overheard, and she said, "Well, I want to know about that. I want to be a brilliant entrepreneur." But we all have our brilliance. And so we just help people with the collaboration, and we learn from each other. And as one of them, we're in our 5th year, by the way, with our charter members. We're launching a second group, and we're also launching an online program. So that's a couple things that we're doing here now and online.
That's awesome. Did you hear the phone call that just came through, or was that just on my end?
No, it's on your end. I didn't hear it.
Oh, good. Okay, cool.
I was going to say somebody calling about COBE
somebody was
right
just
now.
calling. Yeah, they were. They're
This
actually,
is a
they were
COBE call.
calling in.
I'll say, "Excuse me, I'll take it."
That was a good catch right there. I love it. So let me ask you this, like, what does transform even mean? Like, because I put transform in the title. So like, let's help people understand, what does that word mean to somebody? Like, what does that look like in your opinion? Like, I think everybody's got their opinion of what it is, but what does it mean to you?
I'll give you an example. I coached a CEO who had been in place for a year, and I was called in by the chairman of the board and by the public relations agency for the company. And they said, "You need to make this CEO a CEO." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And they said, "You need to transform from being the CFO to the CEO." So in that particular case, it's really all starts with mindset. When people see themselves in a different position, they're much more apt to embrace the qualities that it takes to be in that position. So with this CEO, it involved how to dress the part, how to be more inspirational to the troops, how to take more control, how to talk to analysts, how to talk to the media, and how to interact with other leaders in the community. So we had a program, I think it was a 3-month program, something like that. And about midway through, or as we were wrapping up the contract, I called the chairman of the board and I said, "Look, I need to know, how are we doing? Because we don't have that much more time left on our contract here." And he said, "All I can say is that our CFO is acting awfully CEO-ish." And so we knew we were succeeding. So that's a form of transformation. And it really starts with the mindset. If you want a different position, people talk about, well, visualize that position and manifest that position. And that's all great. And I visualize when I wanted to be on television, I visualized it. There are some definite skills, techniques, characteristics, and qualities that you need to develop for that next position. And so that's where I come in.
Okay. So how does, like, let's say somebody's, listen, what would you say? So maybe two questions here. One is, how does somebody know that they even need to transform? And then second, like, what percentage of people would even think that? Right? Like, because
Now that's a good question. I'm going to say that's a good question. See, that's one of those questions I don't get asked all the time.
Thank you. I'm glad I was able to get one good.
I don't get asked that all the time. But here's the thing. Most people don't, David. Most people, that CEO didn't contact me directly. I was brought in by the chairman of the board, as I said, and by the public relations agency. They recognized it. Oftentimes a CEO, I'll give you an example, at one of the nationwide household, Eli Lilly, excuse me, one of their divisions, the new CEO was taking over for the former CEO. Well, he was moved to some other position, and probably chairman. And he was not a great communicator. I mean, and by his own admission. And so when his staff or team or PR person or whoever, whomever made that decision, that really some coaching would be advantageous. And that's when I was brought in. He was very receptive to it because he didn't know it himself. I mean, he knew it himself. Oftentimes people don't. They think what they do is just, they think it's acceptable because that's the habit they've been in. If they're not a great speaker, they just say, well, I'm not a great speaker. Well, that doesn't really work if the job position requires it. And I'll give you a very good example. I worked with the vice chair of Credit Suisse, and he came in, with the arms folded and why am I here? And I don't want to do this kind of attitude. And he said, I think this, he said, I don't like to speak and I'm Swiss and I'm not demonstrative. And I said, that's all fine, except that you are on a stage where you are introducing dignitaries from around the world and you're interacting and you're opening all these events. So somebody at Credit Suisse thought that this could be advantageous. So how about we change the mind shift that I'm here, I'm going to do this half-day session. I said, they've contracted me for 2 sessions, half-day private. I said, which is really to your advantage because that's a good investment that they're making in you. And after the first session, because we use videotaping a lot, and he said, wow, he said, I had no idea I could make these improvements. And then long story short, after our contract was up with Credit Suisse, he then contacted me. He had by that time been promoted to New York. New York office, he then started contacting me every time he came here in Los Angeles, because this is where his home is. And we worked 3 other private sessions with me. And then it's so funny that we think about this today as I would, David, with this question. I just came across a letter from him. And I don't know where it was in our testimonials, and we're doing a new website, so we're looking at some of the testimonials. And he said, you took me from a stiff and turned me into a human being. Mm. And I thought, and he's not young, so he learned that, boy, you can, and that's what he said to me. He says, wow, he said, you can learn something about yourself every day. So that's transformation for you.
Yeah, he must have been open to that, though, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people may not be, right? Or do you see like people that are in higher levels, are they typically more open-minded, or
the higher level people are generally, I can't say always, generally more open-minded. The more seasoned they are, the more they think what they have been doing is just fine. Until they see the potential and what's possible. And I think only in my entire career, and I've been doing this for about 3 decades now, I've had, I think maybe 3, maybe 4 people. And one person said it to me very directly. Okay, you've shown me what I need to do, how to do it. Now I'm going to make the choice. Do I want to do it? And I said, well, only you can make that choice. And so people have to, it's David, this. I mean, you can coach. You can provide, a roadmap, if you will, the whole guide. And if people don't implement, then it doesn't really matter. That's not your job. Your job is to show them what they need to do and help them learn how to do it. And then whether they make the choice to do it or not, that's up to them.
What makes a great coach?
Depending on what type of coaching, but I will say as an overall, because I'm not an accountability coach, I'm not going to talk to someone and ask them if they made 50 phone calls this month or whatever. That's not my role. But it depends on the coach. But what I feel is if a coach can create a safe environment, which is what we hear all the time, for people to grow, if a coach can help open the mind, if a coach can show what the possibilities are, the potential that's possible. And listen, of course, but you need to be able to interact. There are some people I can give it to just like this and they get it. Other people, it's a slower process. Other people, they want to go so far and then they'll come back to me. I've had people come back to me 3 and 4 years and say, now I've got this level. Now I want to advance to this level, so they come back, they know when they're ready. But a good coach will make, I'm very individual, David. Even if I'm coaching with a group, sometimes a company will bring me in a corporation to coach, 3 or 4 of their people and say maybe up to 5 or whatever. Everybody's got a different strength, and a coach will always play to the strength. And then when you help people make these improvements, it's just like going on a diet. As soon as someone goes on a diet and people start to say, wow, you're looking really buffed, or what are you doing? You've been going to the gym a lot, or gosh, you look great. That's that inspiration to do more. And so when people can see, right, as I said, we use a camera, when they videotaping, when they can see themselves improving right in front of their eyes in a relatively short period of time, that's a good coach. And I've always said, if I can help people, my whole goal would be getting people to take ownership. That's what produces results.
That's awesome. I love that. Take ownership. I got to steal that.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you. I am going to.
Because
that's ultimately what it's about.
You're an honest stealer. Okay.
Yeah. Well, listen, that's right. That's it. Take ownership. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Because I was actually thinking about this the other day, Jude. I'm working with somebody, and like I feel like I'm more committed to his goals and what he says he's going to do than he is, and it's creating it's like stressing me out. Like simple things, like I'm going to start waking up at 6 a.m. every day, yet still doesn't bother, or yet I'm gonna like, yeah. So I think that's owners. Like you need to own it, not me. So and
let me say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but say this. This is the other way that someone taught me this. This was not mine, but I'll give it to you, and you're welcome to have it. He explained it to me this way. Someone from my church, and he said, don't bother throwing a life raft to a drowning person who doesn't want to be saved. So I always thought that was such a clear way of explaining. You cannot want, and I will say this repeatedly, I've said it on stages, my coaching, you cannot want something for someone more than they want it themselves. No matter how much potential you see or what you know is possible, if they don't want it too, you can't want it enough for both of you. It's like being in love. You can be in love, but if the person doesn't love you back, you can't love for two to make a relationship work. It goes both ways. And so I just feel like, and another person, one of the real well-known speaker, it was one of the founders of the speaking organization I belong to, and I never met him. He was passed before I was involved, but he said your job as a speaker, and you could apply it to coaching, David, is to show up, deliver what you said, give the people the tools they need, and then it's up to them to make it work. Your job is not to handhold them to make it work for them.
Yeah.
And when people come to me and say, well, I'd like to have more coaching. And this is the constant content. Every time I comment, every time companies bring us in, they say, can you come back again in 30 days? Can you come back again in 60 days? And I said, well, let's talk, we'll talk to the powers that be that write the check. That's what makes the difference. But when people say, well, I'd like to just be able to get on the phone and tell you what's working, what's not working. And could we set that up? And I go, I don't want to do that kind of coaching. I don't have that kind of time, David. It's just, people have their stories and they're this and they're that. I'm into people. I really love people who are growing and evolving. I like being a part of that continued success. I like being that conduit. And some people are accountability coaches, and bless your hearts, but that's not what I do.
Yeah. I mean, I do a little bit of both. I think in my realm, it's sales. I think people do need some accountability for hitting numbers and stuff. So it's definitely a different type of coaching. But let me ask you this. So one of the questions that, I asked, and I want to understand, I say, what value will you bring to my audience, as you're, as people are, registering, going through the process to be a guest on this podcast. And your answer says clarity. What business are you really in? What did you mean by that? Like, what business are you really in? I saw that and I wasn't really clear myself.
Yeah,
so that's why I'm asking.
I'm glad you asked, because we have a process in COBE, and I'll just give you the shorthand version now. But we have a process, and we talked about habits and distractions and learning delegation and managing your time, all these opportunities available. But this one process is about finding out what business you're really in. Now, the example, and by the way, I don't give any of my COBE members any process, anything that I haven't done myself and worked it out first. And sometimes we do little smatterings of focus testing on things. But this clarity question is so essential and this happened to me. I started reading a lot of my testimonials one day because someone I had coached, rising star, paid for it himself. He said, if I wait for my company to make this investment in me, I'll be waiting 5 years from now. A real rising star. He'd won a rising star award in the financial space, financial advisor. And he said, I want to go to that next level of affluent clients, and I want to be more influential and speak and more, anyway, more confident, more charismatic, all these things. And so we were in a program, about 2 or 3 month program on this one. And he sent me this letter, took me to a celebration lunch and handed me a letter that he wrote to tell me about what he learned and what difference it had made in his life already. This was just within the 3 months. And he said, you can show it to Stan, my husband. And I showed it to my husband. He said, I bet you cried when you read it. I almost do now. Again, he said, I bet you cried when you read this. He said, because I'm almost crying. He said, and I'm not the coach. And I did, because it was such a there's that word again, such a transformation, David, that I then started looking at all my testimonials. And I thought that I was in the communication business. I come out of television, broadcasting, I interview people, speak. I thought I was in the communication business. I found out I was in the leadership business. I was in the confidence building business. Letters would say, oh, my confidence has improved. I mean, I'm producing more results. My presentations are better. My revenue's increased or whatever. And that line almost always would come in. And it doesn't matter how high level the executive or the financial advisor or the person I'm coaching, the word confidence comes into almost every single testimonial and letter. But I realized that leadership and confidence were the two words that is, when I put them all together and said, what's the theme here? And so when you get clarity on what business you're in, it does two things. One, it gives you an understanding of what you thought. So there's a mind shift change, because this is what people are getting from you. But it also, for me, I dried my tears, as I like to say, I dried my tears and raised my fees, because it took me out of one area into another area. And that was that's what I mean by clarity. Find out what business you're in. You think you know. And like, I'll give you an example of, this isn't a Rolex. I've got my Elvis Presley watch on that a TV critic gave me. But I remember but my watch made me think about it. The CEO founder of Rolex watches was asked by a reporter. The reporter started to ask the question. He said, now you're in the watch business. And the CEO said, no. I'm in the luxury status business. Anybody can buy a watch. Not everybody is the owner of a Rolex. Disney, when Disney was first, really becoming on the map, and these are things that I've read and researched, but I love this. And I don't know whether it was Walt Disney or the team or who it was that came up with it, but someone said, well, we're in the amusement park. And he goes, no, we're not in the amusement park. We're in the experience business. We're in the family experience business. That separates them from amusement park, doesn't it? And so anyway, there's just a way to look at and it's also, it's learning about your business, but also, and I do want to get this into everybody, and that's not we all have the tendency to take our gifts for granted. And when you really understand your gifts, and that's the clarity part, it changes your mindset. It changes your business. It can change your life.
Awesome. So I've got 2 more questions for you today, and I really love that answer. Your last, as I'm listening, thinking like, what business am I in? I have to, spend some time, because I love confidence, because ultimately that's what I think that could fit in a lot of businesses. I inspire people. Really, that's what I do. That's my vision, inspiring millions, 1 or 1,000 at a time. So but how does that, yeah, it's a great question. Great question for you listening to this. I would put some pen to paper and really think about, what business are you in right now? So, all right. Number 1 question for you is the question that I wanted to make sure I asked is, what's the common driver of an iconic high achiever? What is the common driver of iconic high achievers? Which is the question you gave me.
Yeah, it is, because there is a common driver. And and there are several actually, by the way, there's not just one answer to this. It's people who know that something can be done better. It's people, and I say it, it's kind of cliche, but I say it as a fact. When you have that burning desire to do something, that's a driver. And I actually got this from a very high-level person. I produced his life story documentary. He'd come here as an immigrant to this country and launched 3 international businesses. That is no easy feat. And I asked him what was the driver. And he said, I knew I could. And so he knew he had that potential, that desire. And he said that. He said, I'm on fire. He didn't use the word desire. He said, I'm on fire with what I know I can achieve. So I just put on fire with desire because people can remember that. But on fire with desire. And here's the other driver that I love is that people who are highly successful, we ask them to say, now, what if this all disappeared tomorrow? That's one of my questions. What if this all disappeared tomorrow? Then what? Oh, I'd do it again. I'd create it again. I mean, there's that strong drive, and it's not about at a certain level, and everyone needs to hear this, at a certain level, it is not about the money. People reach a certain amount of success in their life where they're not worried about whether they have 50 cars. I mean, 50 homes, five homes here and 5 cars there, and whatever they've accumulated. It becomes the idea, I've got this desire and I know I can do it. And that's the drive. I know I can do it. I'd never been on television, David, and it wasn't even my idea to go on TV. I had taken acting classes when I first got out here to Los Angeles. I did some TV commercials. I got the first play I read for, turned it down. I really learned early on I did not like acting. Now, it could have been very lucrative. I liked the checks I got, the residual income from commercials, no two ways about it, but I didn't love acting. So I was in public relations, and I would have clients on Regis's show. And his producer came up to me one day, his executive producer, and she got right in my face. And she said, Jude, you're making a big mistake. She said, you're missing the boat. You belong in front of the cameras, not your clients. And she turned around and walked away. And I called her up the next day and I said, I want to have lunch. And she said, yeah, I know why you want to have lunch. So we had lunch. And she said, I'm going to give you an audition. And she did. And she called me that night at home and she said, you're ready for television. And she said, Regis has a co-host. We don't need a co-host, but you're ready for TV. So a lot of times people see things in you, and the idea then, David, she sparked that idea. I don't think if it hadn't been for her that I really would have pursued it, because I wasn't thinking about that. She saw that, and I thought the idea of being myself and then using my curiosity and the energy to carry a show, I can do this. But I didn't know that I could do it, but I didn't say no. I just felt I could do it. So then the opportunity came, and then I was able to guest host on a TV show here in Los Angeles right away, a morning show, KCBS. So you don't wait until you're ready to get ready, everybody, because you can spend a whole lifetime waiting to get ready. And I didn't know how it was going to turn out, David. I had no idea, but I thought if someone of that caliber who's experienced, this wasn't some little cable channel out in the middle of nowhere. This is LA, and she said, you belong in front of the cameras. I listened to her. She discovered it. So that's my other message today, is that sometimes that fire is burning, that desire. Other times people see things in you that you may not see in yourself. And a good coach, by the way, I think, David, you'd say this as well. A good coach, we not only see the potential, we help you see it.
Yeah, that's a great point. 100%. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Jude, if they want to learn more about you, about COBE, about what you're up to?
Thank you. Well, we have the Jernudd website, Judy Jernudd, JERNUDD.com. And also, because we're on Clubhouse too right now, you can just send me, we have a link tree there on DM me. We have a COBE online intensive that we're launching, and we're going to launch it first to a very small beta testing group and special fee consideration, everything. And what we're doing, David, is taking our master COBE playlist of all these processes that I have created and designed over the last 5 years. And we're taking those processes, put them into a COBE intensive. It's going to be a 5-week intensive online. All you have to do is DM me or send me an email, Judy at Judy Jernudd, or Jude at Jude Jernudd. Either way, I'm listed both ways. I'm called everything from Judy, Jude, and Judith. I answered all. But send me your DM or just go to Linktree, and we've got process. Oh, by the way, we do have process. We have a clarity process, your what and your why. So that's a really good process for you. We have a delegation process. So go there, take any of that material that'll help you, any of those processes. And then we'll let you know the date of the COBE intensive, because it's going to be a very small invited beta test for the online. It's the first time we've done it. but I know that there's a need for it, David. There's a need for people who, don't want to, they maybe can't come into Los Angeles, or they don't want to pay the charter membership fee, but this is going to be a really big price consideration. And yet the process is to help you, to help all of us become better entrepreneurs.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. So final question. I'm thinking, like, what's a question I can ask you? Well, I already got you with one, which is good. So
Which I
I've
like, by the
accomplished
way.
my goal.
You did.
And yet let me ask, so here's another question that I have not, well, I think I've asked a few people, but what's the question that you want to be asked, but you're never asked? Is that a good question?
There's another good question, David. I mean, not that all your questions weren't good questions, but I mean, that's the
I
question
get
that
it.
I love.
I get it.
That's the one that I love. What was my drive? I'm never asked what was my drive. Did you hear me?
Yeah. So what?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just waiting
Oh,
for you to answer this
I don't know if
question.
you want to ask that question or not, but
Yeah,
that's
I'm just waiting for you to answer it. But if you want me to
okay.
ask it, I'll ask it.
Yeah. Okay, you can ask
What
it.
was your drive, Jude?
My drive was, and I say this without ego, but when you know that there's more, in fact, that's the tagline for COBE, for high achievers who want more. When you know that there's more that you can do, that you can be, that you can accomplish, that's the drive for me. And I've always felt with anything. And my one question is, people might say, well, it's sort of cliche, but it is. It's true. I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, what is the worst that can happen? And I've asked this question of a lot of celebrities, and they'll always say that they don't regret. And I say, any regrets? And people say they have no regrets. I'm thinking you haven't really lived your life yet, or you're not in touch with it. I mean, if we all wouldn't do some things differently with the knowledge that we have along the way, I don't mean that you live in remorse, but I'll ask this of celebrities, and they'll say, the regret I have is that I've learned that I don't want the regret of not trying. I'd rather try. I don't want to live with the fact, what if I had done what that burning desire was? What would my life be like? And that's how I feel that there's things. I'm getting ready to launch something, David, that I'm not, it's a book I'm writing, and I think it's going to be a very good commercial success. I'm not talking about it yet, but I have a vision for this. I don't know if it's going to work or not. I mean, it's not just a book, it's what I'm creating around it. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but if I don't do it, if I don't try, I don't want to live with that. If I fail, I say, okay, wasn't meant to be. I did what I could. I tried. Done with it. But if I don't try, then I think that I've cheated myself.
Great answer. Yeah.
I would say to anybody, if you've got that on fire with desire, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be totally prepared. You just have to start.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to do it. You just got to jump, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I just feel like living with regret about what I didn't do, I think would be really hard, for me. I would rather, obviously we'd like to be successful at everything we try and we do, and we want to accomplish in all of our dreams. That isn't maybe reality. But if you don't try, can you live with that? And the answer for me is no, I have to try.
Was it the famous Jim Rohn that says, it was a quote, something, I can't remember. Of course, I can't remember it now. Well, it was, so wasn't it like the regret weighs, I don't know, I forget it. Like failure weighs ounces, regret weighs tons, or something like that. I mean, I think that's the idea, right? Like,
yeah,
when you fail at something, yeah, it stinks. It doesn't feel good. But when you don't do something, regret is even worse.
Yeah, I see too many people who live in a a what if world, and they didn't do it. And there's a reason that people are unhappy, and a lot of that happiness comes from you don't feel fulfilled. If you're not fulfilled within yourself, it's pretty hard to deliver for other people. So I guess I would leave that thought with everybody, is that start, try. And this is the other driver, people, as I said, don't think every entrepreneur, everything they touch turns to gold. It does not. Someone told me the other day, I was interviewing actually in Clubhouse, it's not all glitz and glamour, and success isn't glitz and glamour for anybody. You'd be so amazed at how many people had failures and hang around LA for 10 years before something happens for them, actors. And yet that drive, was so powerful. And I will leave you with this one thought. It's not mine. And I don't know if I read a lot of biographies, and there was the woman, she was called she was called Great Lady of Theater, Helen Hayes. And I really don't know her work as much because this was a long, long time ago, but I read this line from her when I was studying some biographies when I was in school. And she said, when young actors would come up to her and say, Miss Hayes, what do I do? How do I become an actor? What should I start? Where should I start? What should I do? She would say, if anything can stop you, let it. Meaning that it's hard work. It takes a lot. You may or may not succeed. It's not simple. If you don't really want it, don't go after it. If anything can stop you, let it. Because the desire is not on fire for you. That's not Helen Hayes, that's Jude.
That's awesome. Well, Jude, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, just thank you. And look forward to when you come up with your next book and what's next. We can, we'll have to do this again.
I would love to, David. And thank you. And thank you for those. I'm going to have to go back and watch this because I like those 2 questions I hadn't been asked before. So I'm going to go back to that.
Awesome.
Thank you, David. Always great to be
congrats with all your success. Thank you
Thank you so much.
on all your success.
Thank you.
All right.